One of the things that you guys often tell me in the comments section, which I always read and I really do appreciate, is that I bring a common sense approach to preparedness. I like that. I think it's actually necessary to have a common sense approach to survival and preparedness, and unfortunately I don't think it is as common as it should be. And the reason why it's important is that if you don't have a common sense approach to things, especially if you don't have a common sense approach when preparing for emergencies and disasters, you're probably not doing it right. You're probably not having an approach that is aligned with what's likely to happen in reality. So yeah, I appreciate that, but I think it should be definitely more common. And folks, stick around. This is a video that I definitely want you guys to watch. It's probably going to be a little bit of a longer video, and I'm going to be addressing certain things that will be important for all aspects of survival and preparedness that you may end up engaging on or planning on. This is a video specifically about a question that was asked in the survivalist boards. This was about the American Redoubt, and this is going to be a video about the holes and problems with the entire concept of the American Redoubt, which a lot of people seem to be interested in. The question was, what do you guys think of the American Redoubt? Where those with similar beliefs moved to Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, eastern half of Oregon, or eastern half of Washington state? The more mountainous terrain, climate, and sparse population are supposed to be advantages. I know it's not financially possible for many, but it's interesting. Well, you will already, not financially possible for many. Why is that? Well, because it's usually places where there's not a lot of jobs going around. So that's already a problem. If there's not many jobs, not many ways of earning an income, it's probably not ideal, especially not if you're thinking of economic downturns. Specifically for that, I know that because I've gone through one myself. I've researched others. One of the things that some folks that read what I write in my website, in my books, is that I just focus on my experience in Argentina. I don't do that. I mean, if I did that, I would be extremely limited. Actually, if I had done that, I probably wouldn't have fared very well in Argentina either, because it would be very much a trial and error kind of approach. That's definitely not what I do. I research, I study as much as possible, and of course you end up applying that and learning along the way what works in reality and what doesn't. And one of the things that I actually learned and got to see firsthand is that this idea of being isolated, being alone, and especially being away from everything, especially away from employment, your family, friends, your network support, it just doesn't work as well as it works in fantasy and fiction. And you definitely don't want to start thinking about your preparedness based on fantasy, based on what you see on movies or read on fiction novels. It's the kind of thing that you want to be doing based on reality, based on what has worked or not in the past. But let's get back to the American Redoubt thing. And this is, I'm going to be reading straight from Wikipedia. Here it says, American Redoubt. There we go. The American Redoubt is a political migration movement first proposed in 2011 by best-selling survivalist novelist and blogger James Wesley Rawles, which designates 3 states in the northwest United States, Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, and adjoining portions of 2 other states, Eastern Oregon and Eastern Washington, as a safe haven for conservative, libertarian-leaning Christians and Jews. Kim Murphy, a reporter for the Los Angeles Times, summed up when motivation for the movement: for a growing number of people, it's the designated point of retreat when the American economy hits the fan, when the banks fail, when the government declares martial law, and power grid goes down. The same article identifies Rawls as the guru of the movement. Well, again, we go back to the thing about basing your realistic preparedness on a novel. Awful idea, especially when reality contradicts it quite a bit. When you look at examples in recent history of very tough moments in certain places of the world, in certain parts of the world. If you look at Bosnia, for example, the war in Bosnia, where the Serbs invaded, and you have pretty much there a worst case scenario in case of from the perspective of a force overwhelmingly crushing a weaker population. I actually learned a lot from studying the siege of Sarajevo, which is a city that was sieged for the longest period of time in modern history. Lots of things to learn from that. And people will usually see that and go, look what happens in a city, that's awful. Now, what they're missing is actually doing proper research and actually studying it well and understanding what's been happening in other places during that same period. Actually, some of the worst massacres during that period of time happened in those small, very small towns. If you think of the Srebrenica massacre, the Foka massacre, all those massacres, all those genocides that took place where men, women, and children were just butchered to pieces, happened in these smaller communities. Actually, they were the first ones. The invading force moves forward and is not sparing anyone, especially when it's about doing an ethnic cleansing. It's actually, I cannot think of a worse position to be than that, having an overwhelming force attacking you in such a way and having no regard whatsoever. You're not going to be spared because you are in some isolated position. Actually, it's more likely to be worse for you. By all means, the best thing to do, as I've often addressed before, is you get out of there. That's always the best thing to do. Now, what happens if you cannot get out of there? Would I rather be stuck in Foka? Would I rather be in Srebrenica? Would I rather be in a homestead somewhere there in between in the mountains? Those ended up becoming rape houses. Those ended up becoming torture chambers where people, they actually had concentration camps. You would have been much better off actually being in Bosnia, in Sarajevo. You have been much better off. Sarajevo, you have people being sniper fire over queues for water and for food, people being shot while waiting for food and water. You have children that were shelled during break time in schools. Classes were often suspended and such. Very little power, going without power for long periods of time. The market being shelled at the moment when it was when the most amount of people was there. So you have people being butchered and murdered there as well. But at the end of the day, your chances of survival were much better in Sarajevo than in one of the towns that were completely decimated. All right. And that's because there's a much larger amount of population. It's much more it's more difficult to massacre 100,000 people than to massacre 2,000 people in a small town, or to massacre 5-10 people in a small homestead. We learned the same thing from farmers in South Africa during the period that they were being attacked ruthlessly as well. So all these reality events teach us something that contradicts quite a bit with what we have proposed here in Raul's novel, which is a small group of merry survivalists fighting the UN and actually winning to a great degree. Let's keep reading and seeing what we have here. The same article identifies Rawls as the guru of the movement. All right, summarizing one of his reasons for formulating the relocating strategy, Rawls states, okay, this is one of his reasons for formulating the relocating strategy is, I'm often asked why I make such a big deal about choosing conservative Christian, Messianic Jews or Orthodox Jews for neighbors. The plain truth is that in a societal collapse, there will be a veritable vacuum of law enforcement. In such times, with a few exceptions, it will only be the God-fearing that will continue to be law-abiding. Choose your neighbors wisely. Well, first of all, you don't get to choose your neighbors, do you? I mean, I'm actually here, I have neighbors, and neighbors come and go. I mean, I can do a little bit of more research before moving somewhere and see who's what kind of demographic you have, if that's something that's very important for you, or you have certain if you feel more comfortable surrounded by certain people. I'm not that kind of person. I don't judge people by their religion or skin color, but some people do, and maybe that's one of the things that they look in a neighborhood. But even if you are like that, at the end of the day, you don't control who's going to be moving next door to you. The place. I mean, and this happens in down the road in a very sparsely populated area. You don't know if the farm next to you is going to be being sold the next year or the following one, or if the house or homestead down the road is going to be rented, sold to someone else. You don't control. You have to understand that you don't control who's going to be your neighbor or not to a great extent. It's something that it's pretty random, and it's completely misleading to think that you can control who's going to be your neighbors or not. Yeah, sure, you have certain tendencies and such because of the way people vote in certain areas, because of the kind of demographics, but at the end of the day, you don't control who's going to be your neighbor. It's beyond, I mean, unless you buy everything around you and place people there, you don't control that. And continuing reading here, the American Redoubt concept is based primarily around Rawlsian, this is funny, Rawlsian survivalist philosophy, including the perception racism ignores reason. James Rawls is an outspoken anti-racist and pro-Israeli. James Rawls published this blog entry in 2010 titled "Least Any Man Should Boast: A Christian Survivalist Perspective on Race, Religion." Well, yeah, the thing is this. I mean, racism is the idea that people are better than others simply based on their ethnicity, religion, all right? That's pretty much what racism is about, believing that someone is superior to someone else simply based on their religion or ethnic background or skin color, all right? So it's not that just preferring to be surrounded by conservative Christians, Messianic Jews, and Orthodox Jews makes you not a racist. I mean, basically, if you're choosing to surround yourself by conservative Christians, Messianic Jews, and Orthodox Jews, then you're saying that you're not feeling very comfortable being surrounded by people that are not those of those religions. So that is quite racist on its own. I mean, if you're not going to be judging people by their religion and by their skin color, by their ethnic background, by the way they talk, by the country they come from, then there's not good people. Then you cannot say that you have some good people and the other ones are not as good as the other ones that you have, the ones that you prefer to be surrounded by, because that's basically what racism is about. You know, not believing that the other person, because it doesn't fall within your conservative Christian, Messianic Jews, or Orthodox Jews, is not as good as those people. So it's interesting there that, you know, just the following paragraph, it makes an anti-racist claim when it's actually pretty racist to begin with. You know, but I guess we go back to this thing of contradiction and the thing about not making a lot of sense. And specifically, let's suppose you don't care really about any of this. The problem is that this doesn't even work. You see what I mean? Because here where we see that Mr. Rawls claims that the plain truth is that in a societal collapse there will be a veritable vacuum of law enforcement. In such times, with a few exceptions, it will only be the God-fearing that will continue to be law-abiding. Choose your neighbors wisely. That's not the plain truth, as Mr. Rawls says, and it's actually very easily verifiable. But just looking in Wikipedia again, you have a table of, in Wikipedia, look up. You can do this yourself. You don't need me, but you know, since we're already doing this, irreligion by country. What is irreligion by country? It's a poll made by Gallup that was basically asking the following question. You know, a professionally made poll that is the following question: is religion an important part of your daily life? Okay, is religion important to you? Yes or no? And that's a kind of question that gives you a good idea of how important religion is for people or not, depending on their country. All right. So let's take a look at what we have depending on country, on if it's true that people in more religious countries are more law-abiding than those that are not. Okay, have the chart here. I'm going to be setting it so as to have the least religious people, the ones that were answering no to a question of is religion important for you or not on daily life. The people that were the least religious, they felt the least strong about religion. Sweden, 88%. Sweden, 88% of people were answering no. Religion is not a big deal for me. All right, it's not as important for them. It's not important. 88%. Denmark, 83%. China, 82%. Well, China, we could argue that it's a communist dictatorship deal there, and religion is pretty much restricted in many ways. So you have then Estonia, you have Norway, you have United Kingdom, you have France, you have Hong Kong, you have Czech Republic, you have Japan, you have Finland. Finland 69%. I'm going down from top to bottom. Belgium 68%, Australia 67%, New Zealand 67%, and there we keep on going. So these are the countries that are the least religious. Now, I know this because I did this research myself for my book. These are some of the safest countries in the world. Okay, the countries that are the least religious, based on a chart that may have a margin of error, but it's very clear: Sweden, Denmark, China, Estonia, Norway, United Kingdom, France, Hong Kong, Czech Republic, Japan, Finland. These are all very, very safe countries. You may like them or not. That's not the question here. You may like these countries or not. You may like the kind of society that it has, too left-leaning, too far, too right-leaning, whatever it is. But you cannot argue that these are very, very safe. Actually, Japan, we've had the actual cold fact of the tsunami over there, and people reacted in a way that few other countries in the world would have reacted. As a population, they kept their composture very well. They didn't loot nearly as much as Chile. Chile, for example, is a very religious country. It's a very Christian, it's a very Catholic country, Chile, right? But it was actually one of the countries where people acted the worst when disaster hit them with a tsunami. Same thing in Japan. Actually, I'm going to be looking it up for you. Chile is 27%. So in Chile, 27% of people said that religion was not important on their daily life. In Chile, 27%. In contrast, in Japan, you have 71% of people, okay, opposite spectrum, 71% of people saying that religion was not important for them. And still they acted in a admirable way when they were hit by a disaster. They stayed very law-abiding. You know what Rawls was talking about. They stayed very law-abiding because of their kind of culture, because of the kind of way that they are. And it's not just an Asian thing, if that's what you may be thinking, because same thing goes for Sweden, Denmark as well. The Nordic countries, very law-abiding people in general. What about the other end of the spectrum? The people that are the most religious, the ones that are supposed to be the most law-abiding. Let's go down there. We have Yemen, Sierra Leone, Malawi, Indonesia, Comoros, Central African Republic, Thailand, Sri Lanka, Nigeria, Niger, Mauritania, Kuwait, Guinea, Ecuador, very violent place. I mean, these are all places where, no doubt whatsoever, are far more violent than the other end of the spectrum, all right? Kuwait, Guinea, Ecuador, Senegal, Mali, Laos, Kenya, Cambodia, Afghanistan, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Pakistan, Jordan, Ghana. These are all places, Ghana, and these are 4% of people were saying that religion is not important, okay? Qatar, Afghanistan, 3%. So 3%, so that means that 97% of people were saying that religion is very important for them. And it's not just if you're racist or you have a misconception regarding certain peoples and certain religions. I actually have a wide spectrum here because Ecuador is not the same as some of these Middle Eastern countries, different religions and such. Africa as well. So you have Africa, Middle East, Latin America. We have Chile being it's more in the middle, but it's still far worse than some of the other countries. So it's you may like it or not, but it's very clear that religion and strong religion convictions, no matter what religion is, it's not really linked to safer environments. It's actually, you may like it or not, but the facts are very clear. It's actually the opposite. I'm not saying anything against any religion in particular. I don't really care that much what people do in their own homes. But it's simply not true that religion will make you safer. And this is important because these are the reasons why you're doing the things of the American Redoubt thing, right? This is why you're doing this. Supposing that these are facts, and these are put out there as facts, when in reality they are not. And in reality, they're not only not true, they're actually opposite of what really happens, what happens in reality. And there's many other things that you can find problems with. We've already addressed the idea of being isolated and being in a place where there's little employment as a good idea for an economic collapse. Not true. This idea that going back to what Rawls was saying regarding a collapse, and here we go. The idea that you will have more of a better infrastructure. I mean, here we go. For a growing number of people, it's designated point to retreat when banks fail, when the government declares martial law. I've been through martial law. I mean, it wasn't, the power grid goes down. When the power grid goes down, again, folks, realistic preparedness, being smart about this, doing your research, basing yourself on facts, not fantasy, or not things that are just brought out of a novel and claimed as truths. The reality is that when there's a serious economic problem, no matter where, Argentina or any other place, and the grid is starting to suffer, which it probably will, as well as every other aspect of infrastructure, roads, water. When that happens and decisions have to be made, if $1,000 or $1 million is going to be helping out 1 million people or 100,000 people, that's going to be done before spending that same amount of resource, money, manpower, so as to serve 10 or 100 people or 1,000 people. If with $1 million you help 1,000 people, and with those same $1 million you help and serve 100,000 people, guess where money is going to be going? That's why when these things happen in reality, and when you study them, you see that the further away you branch from the main population areas, which you may like or not to live in for a number of reasons, but the further away you go from those places where most people are being served, it's a simple matter of common sense. The further away you are, the longer it's going to be taking for roads, power lines, everything else to be repaired, because it's not as crucial, it's not as efficient as serving the places where you're going to be helping out and providing for most people. You have many other aspects. You have the obvious problem of being further away from main population areas means you're going to be further away from hospitals and medical care, which in everything I've looked into, there's a clear drop of life expectancy the further away you are from these population areas. Why is that? Well, because at the end of the day, if something happens to you, an accident, or you need medical attention, the further away you are from a hospital that can provide that assistance to you in that moment, the more your chances are of dying or having greater consequences for that. And of course, hospitals, as we were addressing before, are placed in locations where they serve the most people. You're not going to be having a hospital in an area that's only going to be useful for 100 folks. You're going to be having it where it helps and provides for the most amount of people. Usually, of course, that's near main population areas. And like there's several problems in the entire idea of at the end of the day, one of the things that I think people suffer the most, it's not only the problem of employment. People send me emails all the time with their problems and such, with the decisions they made, their regrets many times. One of the things mentioned the most is that they've placed themselves in a place where they don't have any good jobs, or the job that they had, they lost it and they're not finding another one. They're not making enough money. It's more expensive than they thought it would be. What they're producing locally, what they're growing, the food they're producing is not nearly compensating for what they're doing. It's basically not working for them economically, which is a very common problem for farms in general. Most of them, actually, very interesting what was discussed here, many of them, if not most of them, are subsidized to a great degree. They would not work, they would not be viable without government money being injected into them. So how does that work in terms of self-sufficiency? I mean, it's completely understandable that if you have if you're independently wealthy and you have other sources of income and can basically live wherever it is that you are, sure, you can do this. You can live in an isolated place in the American Redoubt area. Is this the best solution for a disaster? Absolutely not. I mean, absolutely not. Actually, many of the things that you will be needing, such as employment, such as a network of friends, family, friends, I don't know if you know this already. That's the most important thing, and that's one of the things that people, when they tell me their problems, it's one of the things that people suffer the most. I'm moving to the American Redoubt because of the end of the world and the zombies coming after me, and I'm leaving behind my family and my friends, my network of employment. You're leaving behind your safety net, basically, and that's what you're going to be needing the most. All right. When you end up getting sick, when you end up getting a divorce, when you end up having your kids going through tough times, through problems, and you don't have that family nearby to help you out, that's one of the things that people will no doubt suffer the most. So be smart about this, be clever, be distrustful as well. Many times when people recommend you, and this happens in international living magazines, telling you to move to Panama, and right next to it they have an advertising for the realtor for you to buy a place in Panama. Okay, be smart, use your head. They're trying to send you to Panama because they're making money out of that. If I'm telling you to move to the American Redoubt or Idaho or wherever, and I have right next to it a nice link telling you my recommended realtor for that, you're making money out of that. So be clever, understand what's better for you and not for someone else trying you to make certain decisions. Fear always has soul, especially in the survival community. People go for fear, they fall for fear, they buy based on fear, they buy based on cool as well. Guns, I mean, man, we all love guns, and we all are going to be finding ways of justifying what we like in terms of guns. Is it the ultimate solution for everything? Of course not. When it's funny, one of the comments that someone made in this American Redoubt thread was regarding guns, and here I can shoot, and here I can have more guns and such. And I told him, you know what, you're not going to be shooting the economic collapse. You're not going to be shooting your financial problems. You need to fix your financial problems with money, with income, right? Guns are not the solution and solution for absolutely everything. So be smart. Folks, I have, of course, written a lot about this. My book regarding the advice in bugging out and relocating. I address all of this that I'm talking about here before. The logical, common sense approach to things. Where is it that I'm going to be relocating? I'm going to be relocating to a place that is safe. I'm going to be relocating to a place that I think has resilience in harsh and tough economic times. A place where there's people that can get by, where there's employment, where when you have a community that already is pretty safe, there's a good chance that in spite of the an economic crisis or a downturn in any other aspect, if it's already very safe, there's a good chance that it will still be safer than other areas. One of the things that I talk about here is it's very surprising, especially in America. It's not always that the small community is safer. Many times I was surprised if you look at city data and such, which I talk a bit about there. Many times the 5,000, 10,000 population town, little town in the middle of nowhere, has a much worse crime rate than a much larger community elsewhere. So it's not always directly proportional that people ends up being looters and mass murder and whatnot. If it's not safe now, it's not going to be safe later on. If it's safe now, there's a good chance that it may be getting a little bit worse, but it's not going to be getting as bad as in other areas. Some of the other things I talk about in the book is, things like climate. You're going to be going to an extremely cold weather place. You may like it or not, but you're going to be having certain concerns so as to provide heating. It's not cheap either. Growing seasons are also worse if that's what you're thinking about doing. Jack Spirko, he's not located in the American Redoubt. He's located in Texas, and I think it's actually one of the smart things. Without even knowing it, when I talk with him, with Jack in the Survival Podcast, he's actually in Texas, in one of the, very close to one of the, pretty much in that same place, one of the main places that I recommend myself, in Texas. Why Texas? Safe, good quality of life, good infrastructure, good people. You have good gun laws as well, which are important. So Be smart, do your research, and then make your decisions. Folks, my other book is also available there, and the two links are there below for Amazon. The Modern Survival Manual, Surviving the Economic Collapse, which you guys seem to like as well. Folks, take care, have a great day, enjoy your Christmas, and spend a good time with your family. Have a great Christmas and family all together. See you on our next video.